Have you ever looked at your life and thought, why does everything technically work and still feel wrong? It's not disastrous, it's not rock bottom, it's just off. The relationship, the career, the routine, the version of you that built this life. And from the outside, it all still makes sense. But internally, something isn't landing the same anymore. And that can be deeply confusing, especially when there's no obvious reason to feel this way. Because if your life isn't falling apart, why does part of you feel like it can't keep doing this? If that's where you are, you may not be lost. You may be in the early stages of an identity awakening. And the tricky part, an identity awakening doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it just looks like you suddenly can't fake your own life anymore. In this video, I'm walking you through 7 signs you may be going through an identity awakening. What's actually happening beneath the surface and why this season can feel so uncomfortable even when it's leading you somewhere important. So if you've been asking yourself, what is going on with me lately? This video is for you. Sign number 1, you feel disconnected from the life you once wanted. This is usually the first sign. You look at your life and think, I thought this was what I wanted, so why doesn't it feel right anymore? And that's what makes this season so disorienting, because it's not always that something is bad. It may still look good, still function. It may even still impress other people. You still go to brunch, answer the text, show up to the meetings. You still do the life. But internally, it can feel like you're wearing your life instead of living it. And that disconnect is hard to explain, especially when there's no obvious disaster to point to. So here's what's often happening. A part of you has changed. Your values may have changed, your priorities, your tolerance, but the life around you hasn't caught up yet. So if you've been feeling disconnected from things you used to want so badly, it simply means a version of you has already outgrown the container you're in. All right, sign number 2, you can't unsee what you've been tolerating. This is where things start feeling a little louder, because once you become aware of yourself, you also become more aware of where you've been abandoning yourself. You start noticing things you used to normalize, like people pleasing to keep the peace, over functioning so other people don't have to, shrinking to stay easy to love, saying yes when your whole body means no, performing instead of actually living. And sometimes it's not one big ginormous thing. Sometimes it's little moments. The favor you don't want to do, the conversation you're done having, the dynamic you've been carrying for way too long. Suddenly, the things you used to tolerate start to feel expensive. And a lot of women misread this part. They think, I'm becoming too sensitive. Why am I so irritated lately? Why does everything suddenly feel heavier? But often what's actually happening is this. Your tolerance for self-abandonment is dropping. You're becoming less willing to override yourself. And honestly, that's not dysfunction, that's awareness. All right, sign number 3. The roles you've always played start feeling heavy. And this one hits deep, because during an identity awakening, the roles that once made you feel safe, admired, needed, or in control start feeling exhausting. Maybe you've always been the strong one, the good girl, the achiever. And the hard part is, you know exactly how to be that version of you. You've had years of practice. You know how to hold it all together. You know how to be dependable. You know how to make yourself useful, which is exactly what makes it so tempting to stay right there. But at some point, the role you got really good at starts costing you more than it gives you. You don't feel proud of it anymore. You feel drained by it. You start noticing thoughts like, I don't want to be the one everyone leans on all the time. I don't want to keep carrying this. I don't even know who I am outside of being who everyone expects me to be. That is a very real sign of identity change, because all of the roles we mastered weren't necessarily built from truth. They were built from adaptation. And there comes a point where the version of you that kept everything going is no longer the version of you that is meant to lead. Sign number 4. You feel pulled towards something, but you can't fully explain it yet. This is that weird middle, the in-between, the part where your old life doesn't fully fit anymore, but the next chapter doesn't have a name yet either. And this is usually where people panic, because if you can't clearly explain what you want next, it's easy to assume you're lost. But not having language yet doesn't mean there's no truth there. Sometimes all you know is, I want more depth, more honesty, more peace. I want more freedom. I want to feel like myself again, or maybe for the first time. And when someone asks, okay, but what do you want instead? You might not have a polished answer yet. That does not mean you're unclear. It usually means you're early in a chapter that hasn't fully revealed itself yet. And honestly, that's normal. A lot of identity awakening don't begin with certainty. They begin with a quiet but undeniable refusal to keep living in ways that no longer feel true. So if all you know right now is, I don't fully know what I want, but I know that this isn't it anymore, that's enough for the stage. Number 5, you start grieving versions of yourself that once made sense. This is a part people don't talk about enough because identity awakening is not always empowering and freeing and exciting. Sometimes it's sad. Sometimes it's completely disorienting. It's lonely. It feels emotionally messy in ways you didn't expect because growth doesn't just ask you to become, it also asks you to release. And sometimes what you're releasing is not bad. Sometimes you're grieving old dreams that used to feel important, old definitions of success, old coping mechanisms that once kept you safe, old relationships built around your old identity. That's what makes it complicated because you know something no longer fits and still feel emotional about letting it go. You might miss the version of you that was easier for other people to understand. You might miss the version of you that was more driven, more agreeable, more certain, more familiar. And that grief can sound like, I know I can't go back, but part of me still misses who I used to be. That doesn't mean you're regressing. It means this matters. You can appreciate who helped you survive and still admit she's not the version of you meant to lead anymore. Number 6. Your nervous system may read growth as danger. This is where so many people think they're doing growth wrong because there's this idea that healing, awakening, or evolution should feel empowering all the time. And no, sometimes it feels like overthinking everything, procrastinating on the very change you say you want, shutting down emotionally, or feeling exhausted after making one honest decision. Or maybe wanting something deeply and also wanting to hide from it. And this is important. That does not always mean you're on the wrong path. Sometimes it means your system is still reading new as unsafe. And that's pretty much it because your nervous system isn't wired to prioritize what is aligned. It's wired to prioritize what is familiar. So when you start changing your standards, your boundaries, your voice, your habits, your self-concept, your body may not interpret that as freedom. It may interpret it as risk, which is why identity work is not just mental, it's also physiological. This is why you can know what you need to do and still feel resistance doing it. So if you've been frustrated with yourself for not just moving on or just changing already, I want you to pause right there. Your body may simply be trying to catch up to the life your mind knows you need, and that requires compassion, not shame. Number 7. You start wanting to choose your life more consciously. This is a turning point. At some point, identity awakening stops being only about discomfort and starts becoming desire. You begin asking different questions, not just, how do I make this easier? Or how do I keep everything the same but just feel better? But deeper questions like, what do I actually want now? What am I no longer available for? What parts of me have been buried under survival, performance, or expectations? If I stopped living by default, what would I choose instead? And this is where things start shifting because you stop managing your life and you start choosing it. You stop organizing yourself around what's expected and start getting honest about what's true. And that doesn't mean you suddenly have every answer, but your decisions start coming from a different place, a more grounded place, a more honest place, a more self-led place. And that's often the real beginning of a life that actually fits. So here's what I want to leave you with. An identity awakening is not always loud. Sometimes it doesn't look like a breakdown. Sometimes it doesn't look like a big dramatic life change. Sometimes it just sounds like, I can't keep being this version of me anymore. And that matters because the moment you stop forcing what no longer fits is often the moment your real life starts asking for your attention. So if this resonated, I want you to take a moment after this video and journal on this one question. What part of my life still works, but no longer feels true? Start there because that question alone can tell you a lot about what in you is already trying to evolve. And if you're in the season, you're in the right place. So make sure you subscribe because on this channel, we talk about identity shifts, nervous system healing, emotional clarity, and how to actually rebuild your life from the inside out.